What's up, everybody? Undead here, back again for another video about survival hunter talents. I posted earlier this week. I posted a video doing an extreme deep dive, some really long form content talking about talents for this spec in Mythic Plus. Got a lot of feedback from you guys that you were interested in something about raid, so that's what we're going to get into today. Probably won't be as deep a dive for a couple of reasons. One being raid is a little bit more structured, cookie cutter. Things don't go wrong. There's not as much need for utility in raid. It's more about doing as much damage as you can. A few exceptions, but for the most part, it's just what's the most damage build. So there's not as much to talk about specifically on the class tree. And secondly, this season, I'm not raiding as seriously as I have been before in the past. So for any of you that are just getting to know me or don't know my background and history with raiding, I spent most of Shadowlands raiding with BDG at a Race to World First, World Top 5 level. Previous to Shadowlands, I've bounced around between World Top 20 guilds, World Top 100 guilds, kind of all over the place depending on how I was feeling any given tier. So obviously I do have some experience raiding at a really high level. This season, I'm taking a more, I don't want to say casual because I'm still playing the game quite a bit, but not raiding in a guild, just doing normal and heroic with my friends. And then this week I was actually able to sneak into, through BDG, I was able to sneak into a 3-9 Mythic on one of their new splits that they're doing. So I have seen a few of the bosses on Mythic. Obviously, I've watched the race. I'm familiar with what the bosses do. And with that, I'll kind of talk to some different options and talents that you'll have depending on what your raid needs to help kill whatever boss you happen to be progressing on. But if you're just looking for normal and heroic, this is going to be super valuable. Mythic, there may be some stuff that I miss, but just want to give you a heads up for that right here so that there's no comments being like, dude, what are you talking about? Like, obviously, I looked you up and you haven't killed Scar and you don't know what's going on. I've talked to a few other guys as well that have progressed. I've already cleared the raid. I spent a good amount of time keying with some guys that are in Liquid right now and are in BDG. So doing my best to give you the best information I can here for you guys. But like with the Mythic Plus, I'm just going to go through 3 builds right off the bat. I guess I'll actually show 4, but the 4th one I'm going to talk about a lot later. But 3 builds that you can stick with and kind of just default to without watching the rest of the video and understanding why. And these will be builds that you can play on pretty much every boss. And one special one that will be about a specific boss. So first I want to show, this is a little bit different from the Mythic Plus video. I want to show a build for if you do not have Forset yet. In Mythic Plus, you can kind of play, there's 2 Mythic Plus builds for the most part that you can default to regardless of what your tier situation is, whether you have Season 1 tier, which I guess is tier 29, 2-piece or 4-piece, or tier 30, this current season's 2-piece or 4-piece. The builds function the same. In Raid, it's a little bit different. There's a clear better build to run if you don't have the new 4-piece yet. Even with the new 2-piece, if you're just at 2-piece of tier 30 or anything below 4-piece of tier 30, you'll want to run a build that uses Spearhead as opposed to Coordinated Assault. That's because a lot of value of Coordinated Assault and the bomb cooldown and running Bombardier comes from the additional damage your bombs are doing with the 4-piece 40% buff with the kill command debuff that we apply with the new 4-piece. So before that, we're running Spearhead, Mongoose Bite is your game, and even with the new 4-piece, there are some gear sets, you might have gear where Spearhead actually sims higher for you still in pure single target. So that's something, utilize the Raid Bots tool and kind of take a look. So this is mostly for pure single target fights. Any sort of cleave with the new 4-piece, you'll play Bombardier, but I'll talk about that in a second. So here's our Spearhead build. This is default. You can kind of switch some stuff in the talent tree or the class tree around if you want. There's like a few extra points, but this is all staying the same. Then we look at when you get your new 4-piece, you'll swap into the Bombardier build, which by the way is super fun to play. I've been having a blast playing this now in Raid, which standard looks like this. Again, you could shift some points around in the class tree, which we'll talk about in a little bit, but this is your standard go-to. Then for fights like Assault or Sarkareth, you can play a more cleave-based build if you'd like. This picks up Fury of the Eagle, it picks up Birds of Prey, and it picks up Butchery and Frenzy Strikes. Or there's a 4th build that you could play that Wowhead recommends specifically for Heroic Sarkareth, and this is to get more damage on the Glimmers, which are the ads that spawn. And this plays no cooldown whatsoever and just leans into having consistent damage all the time, along with Fury the Eagle. Now, I will say I prefer a variation of this build, but we're going to dive deeper into that. That'll be towards the end of the video. So if you want to skip ahead, I'll have a timestamp down below for just talking about Heroic Sarkareth, because I'm guessing Heroic Sarkareth is going to be one of the primary reasons people are looking for a video like this, because it is kind of a unique fight in that it's very single target, but there's a little bit of damage on those ads. It's like pretty important, and trying to find a build on that to get your ahead of the curve for this season is what I'm assuming a lot of people are looking for. I'm sure everybody's kind of just curious about every boss, but this is, I would guess, this is a major point for most players to try to break through. So that'll be towards the end. For right now, we'll start off like we did the Mythic Plus video, and I'm just going to go through the class tree, looking at the Spearhead build to begin with, and talk through what the talent's usefulnesses are, or is, depending on the situation, and where you can swap around points, because there is some swaps we made in the class tree. The Spec Tree is pretty cut and dry. Class tree has some free points, I guess, because there's not as much utility needed. You kind of have your, I can put this here, I can put this here, whatever you want to do. So with that said, we have Kill Command, which we will always have. This is just base of our rotation. There's nothing much to say about this. This is simply here. Concussive Shot is something you're not going to take in raid basically ever. It's a weak slow. You have 20 players in your raid. I guess 10 if you're doing Flexman. At least 10 players in your raid. Somebody's going to have a slow better than this for any situation where you might need it. So it's just, you just will not be ever taking this. Kill Shot's a damage increase. We're taking all the damage talents we can on the class tree. So we will be taking Kill Shot all the time. Trailblazer are my two of the throwaway points. I just like this for running through the raid. If you have to run back, as you're moving between trash, I just like Trailblazer. Sometimes you'll be in weird situations where you have to sit turtle and do some movement, and when you're sitting turtle, this will proc and you'll get some move speed while you're sitting in your turtle. But again, these are two, I call them throwaway points, because they're just, you put them wherever you want, whatever you decide is useful to you. So I'll talk about the other ones in a second. They're more in the middle tree down here, because this isn't, you actually don't need this to get to the second tier. You get your 8 points through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Actually 9 here. So these are extras, and they're all in the middle tree. You could spend these wherever you want. Next, we have Post Haste. This is a default. Always take this forever. It's your major movement cooldown. Disengage is what allows Hunter to be so mobile, especially survival, given that you play melee. It's even more important to have this for dropping mechanics out of the raid and then being able to harpoon back in, things like that, while you lose as little uptime as possible on the boss. Improved Kill Shot. This is more of the same as just the Kill Shot talent. It's a damage increase, so you'll be taking it. This is a never unslot. Then we have Wilderness Medicine. I haven't found any situations in the raid bosses yet where I've had issues with my pets taking any damage, so this is a widely useless talent. Mythic Plus, it's a little bit different, because sometimes your pets will take targeted spells. If nobody else is in range, they'll just be hit with a bleed or hit with some damage, and the extra healing could be useful, but in raid, this is a definite no. Muzzle we take to unlock other stuff. Some bosses it's useful, some bosses it's not, but generally having a kick, especially on trash, if you're not somebody that likes to swap your build around between trash and bosses, which is that's me. I'm slotting into a build and I am running from boss to boss, and I'm not bothering to change for more trash damage. So having a kick is helpful for that. There's a lot of stuff to kick in the Aberrus trash packs. Next we have Natural Mending. This makes Exhilaration a really good defensive, well, more of a reactive button than a defensive, but a survivability tool. This will be up all the time. Big damage events, almost every big damage event you take, you're going to have Exil to help out. So use this early and often to help your healers and save your other bigger buttons for when shit goes wrong, basically. Next we have Tar Trap, which is something you will take in some cases. On Skarn, it's nice to take because it gets you into having a stun available. You can swap some points over through Tar Trap, Trank, or Tar Trap Entrapment in order to take Intimidation. or high explosive trap. Either of these, you may find some more usefulness out of high explosive trap, being able to knock stuff. It's also not bad to take this collection of these three instead of these two, and then you'd probably actually drop misdirect, as weird as that sounds. So you drop misdirect and these two, and then you can take this collection of three or entrapment. It's nice for trash. It's nice to have the stuns to be able to stop some of the abilities having on trash. There's some things to purge on the trash as well if casts go off. So that's like a nice, feels more Mythic Plus-y, but it is a nice little package to take. So that's something to keep in mind. This package of, here, let me drop 3 points here. You have your 1, 2, and 3 that you could do 1, 2, and 3, and then finish out here. Oh, sorry. So it would look something like this. If you really don't want to part with misdirect, you could pull something out of like Natural Mending or Born to be Wild, but I think a lot of times on trash misdirects, whatever. It's more useful in Mythic Plus because you have one tank, whereas in Raid, when you're fighting trash, it's very rare that you rip threat off both tanks, right? So misdirect loses a bit of value. Obviously, it's a useful button, but you can find more value on trash out of these three skills for sure. So I would play around with this, see what you like. I default to the Trailblazer just because I like to move fast, but these are fine as another option. Next, we have Survival of the Fittest. This is always take. This is our big defensive, assuming we're not running a Tenacity pet, which in some cases you will. You have a lot of freedom to play kind of whatever pet you want in Raid. But Survival of the Fittest helps to have a huge defensive regardless of the pet that you take, so you'll be taking this all the time. Trank Shot, as I mentioned, this is kind of in this package of optional stuff, as well as Entrapment. Entrapment, looking at like maybe just Skarn. I guess you could maybe take this on Sarkareth as well. I actually haven't tried that. This might not even work on the Glimmers, but if this works on the Glimmers, maybe not bad. Really, controlling them is not really a huge deal. They kind of just exist under the boss, so this probably doesn't get too much value because of that. Next, we have Improved Traps, which you will never take. This is not... You're not going to get enough use out of this in any raid situation in the current raid to even warrant thinking about this, so we can just kind of skip over. Next, we have Nature's Endurance. I've found Nature's Endurance versus Lone Survivor to be a complete win for Nature's Endurance so far. This makes your Survival of the Fittest a 40% DR instead of a 20% DR, rather than having a longer duration and a shorter cooldown. I think the potency of the defensive is way more important because we have tools like Aspect of the Turtle and Exhilaration on a very short cooldown to kind of get through lower damage events, as well as being able to either play a tank pet which is effectively another Exhilaration with the 20% max health heal and last stand functionality, or a Leech pet to help with rotting damage if you want to play a Ferocity pet. So I think that the empowering your big cooldown is way more valuable than getting a shorter cooldown on another weak defensive button, which we already have. Like, we have plenty of weak defensives to get you through like the small stages, if that makes sense. Next, we have Born to be Wild, which is more CDR on all of our stuff. I think you take this all the time in Raid. This is not I've talked about this maybe being an optional in Mythic Plus, but in Raid being able to just rip turtles and maybe get two uses where you would only get one previously, or 3 uses where you would only get 4 without this talent. I think you always slot into this. Again, like I said, we have extra points after the good stuff in this spec tree, the class tree. So there's no real reason to ever not take this. Scare Beast finds itself to be not useful at all in the current raid. Along with Improved Trank Shot, these are just 2 points that feel very pointless to spend. You won't find a situation where you want them. Intimidation, we talked about. This is included in a CC package that you can take for the most part. You're looking at Skarn for taking this, but potentially some use on trash, as well as really just on trash and Skarn. Next, we have Scatter Shot versus Binding Shot, and Scatter again can be useful on trash. Binding Shot actually has some useful could be useful on Skarn as well. So if you're swapping over to like a CC build to help out your raid with Skarn, I think I would swap into Binding for that as well. Otherwise, I like Scatter just to have it on trash. The single target stop is very useful, I find, but this is widely a whatever you feel like point, and not going to make a huge difference. Other than I would slot into Binding on Skarn. Otherwise, who cares? Next we have Rejuvenating Wind. This is a huge passive defensive. 8% health is a lot. That's a lot of health. It's basically an extra fortitude. Along with empowering our exhilaration to be a stronger skill. So we take this all the time. No reason to ever not take this. Next we have Camouflage, Raid. You're not going to get much use out of the camo. Not something I would take ever. If you happen to have it and you just like being able to run around the raid and stealth, there's a lot of stuff to see stealth in this raid, so it's a little bit difficult to really do anything. Like wipe recovery with camo is not as impactful as you would think. So safe to say you can default off of this. Next we have the Leech package. So this is something that if you're going to not, let me just slot these out. You're going to drop these. Oh, shoot. We'll do that Leech, and then we'll drop these and this, and then come back into here. So this is what, if you want to take the Leech talent, this is how I would take it. And this can certainly be useful. I talked a little bit about the value of Leech and this short duration Leech that doesn't make as big of an impact as you would think on single target fights, which is the majority of the raid. A lot of times you need AoE encounters, like places to do more than just your base damage, especially with the changes they've continued to make to increase the health of characters, while not increasing the proportion or proportionally increasing the damage we do. Means that it takes a longer time for your Leech to add up, meaning that these short bursts of 5% Leech for your team are not always great. The line of sight aspect of this is widely useless in this raid. I guess there's maybe some situations on Assault you could maybe get some value out of this, but for the most part, it's just for the Leech. Now, that is to say, the Leech is going to do more to keep your team alive than pretty much any of this other stuff. So you can take this for sure. I haven't found enough value out of it, and I like to run fast, so I've been taking Trailblazer. But this is just, if I were to, I guess, give a true default build, I would include this as your starter, and then see if you need the other stuff, or if you want the other stuff, or if you don't need this, and you can just kind of put your points wherever. So overlap, big damage overlaps. You can drop an Owl, help your boys out with some Leech, see if that keeps people alive. So this talent is good. It's just something I've not gotten as much value out of as I hoped, so I kind of took other fun talents instead. Next we have Binding Shackles. There's really no reason to take this. There's no situation where you're going to be CCing something and then all of a sudden it's going to be trying to do damage to you. That doesn't really exist in the raid right now, so I would not take this ever. Next we have Hunter's Avoidance. This is an always take. This is maybe the most OP talent in this whole tree, especially in the raid where most damage you take is affected by avoidance. And this is 6% avoidance. That's what this reads as. So big 6% DR on pretty much every ability that's ever going to maybe kill you. So we take this all the time. Next we have Pathfinding. In raid, we are able to take this. In Mythic Plus, it's very difficult to fit this in with everything else that we want to take. And so in raid, it's awesome because this is an excellent talent. 6% move speed is not to be laughed at, especially if you're using slow boots. I'm personally using double Shadow Flame, so I'm not as affected by the slow boots or the Toxic Patch. Maybe you're using slow boots and Toxic Patch, and you're turbo slow, then you're definitely taking Pathfinding. But this should be a default take in all your raid builds, no matter what. We talked about our Owl package over here. Next we have Beastmaster. Pet damage increased by 3%. Your pet, again, even on single target, is not a huge amount of your damage. The other talents in this bottom row are just better. They're just better throughput, so we won't be taking this. And because of that, we're not taking kill command damage, and we're not taking any of the capstone kill commands down here. They're just less damage than all this other stuff. There's no situation that ever makes these do more damage, and there's no situation that ever makes them easier to play. Like, all this stuff is kind of just passive other than Death Chakram. So we're skipping on the left side here. Next, we got Crit Chance or Keen Eyesight for crit chance by 4%. It's just passive damage increase. We'll take this all the time. Master Marksman, again, passive damage increase for your crits. 15% of them, basically your crits do 15% more damage because they're applying a bleed. And then that's buffed even more by our next talent of Serrated Shots, which we're able to fit 2 points into in raid due to the lack of explosive shot, though in some situations you will take explosive, and this is where you'll drop the point out of. Some bosses in particular, if you want to play a more AoE build or a cleave build, like on something like Assault or on Sarkareth or on really just those. I don't think I would slot into anything else. Those are really just the 2 fights that I would maybe swap into explosive shot. There's potential on Skarn if the way your ads are existing on top of the boss, the explosive shot could be valued. But I think its rated shots on 7 of the 9 bosses is always going to be better, especially with the execute value. Because as the boss gets into execute, it's usually getting harder. People might be dying. You're 18 manning, trying to pull off a kill and doing some bonus damage there is very good. Steel Trap is not something we're going to lead into. There is some, I think there's actually some marksman builds that are playing this for more single target. Not the case from what I've seen for survival. This does not seem to be an upgrade, so you can safely just ignore Steel Trap and just take the 2 points here. Then we have Death Chakram. This is just a default all the time. It's a huge damage buff. Makes your cooldowns better, especially if you end up playing some cleave builds that are based around Fury of the Eagle. On Sarkareth in particular, the ads have a 45-second spawn interval, right? So you have Death Chakram, Fury of the Eagle for all the ads that spawn. Very good cooldown for that. Otherwise, it's great single target for your opener. Great single target just to be chucked on cooldown and get a little damage buff applied and do a little damage as well. Arctic Bola is very similar to our other passives down here. Most of these are just passive damage increases. We take this because it's the best 2 points for damage remaining. The slow is, who cares? You're just taking it for damage. And then finally, Serpent Sting and LPI. I talked about this before. I refer to this as LPI for Latent Poison Injector because that's kind of what this has always been called. Or it was Latent Poison in BFA, then it was Poison Injection for the last 2 expansions, so it's LPI to me. Will do more damage than Hydra's Bite, even on the clean fights, and it's also more impactful damage because you're on your primary target. With that said, you don't cast Serpent Sting in your rotation. Serpent Sting is handled by your Green Bombs and by Viper's Venom. So generally, that's the Spec Tree. You'll see some changes as I swap into like some cleave stuff that I have included just to take stuff on Sarkareth or Skarn, but we've talked about that before. Generally, this is, you can play this on every fight, and you'll never have to think about anything. That's your class tree for Aberrus, the Shadowed Crucible. Now, into the Spec Tree, which we have are multiple builds depending on what you're playing. So this first one is going to be, that I'm showing here, is for if you don't have the new 4 set yet, you will play this on, I would play this on every fight. You could maybe consider playing something different on Assault if you don't have 4 set yet, but past Assault, in Mythic at least, I feel like you're probably going to have 4 set past Assault. This, in the heroic versions of the fights, I would play this on every boss if I don't have 4-piece, other than Sarkareth, which we'll talk about. When we get down to the Fury of the Eagle section, we'll talk a little bit more about Sarkareth and what changes you would make. Otherwise, until you get a new 4-piece, I would play this on every boss except Heroic Sarkareth. So, let's talk about the talents. Let's talk about where they're useful and why we're taking what we're taking. So, Raptor Strike, obviously we're taking Raptor Strike because it just unlocks the tree. Wildfire Bomb is less of our damage until we get the new 4 set. Even with the 2-piece, it's not as impactful because it's only a 10% buff, and we don't have the CDR with the new 2-piece. But it's a default take. It's a huge part of our rotation, so we can't not take this. Next, we have Tip of the Spear. This is a passive talent. I know it seems like maybe you want to play around this and stacking up to 3 before you hit Mongoose Bites or kick Raptor Strikes, depending on what you're running. It's not. It's just you take the passive damage increase, and you might as well don't even think about the fact that it exists, pretty much. Below that, we have pet damage through Ferocity, just 10% bonus pet damage. This is just in this opening tier here, you take the best talents for damage that you can, and this is it to get our first 8 points. Flanker's Advantage, again, is something that you could, if you aren't comfortable using Harpoon for damage, or you feel comfortable not needing it for mobility, you could maybe slot into Flanker's Advantage and get some more damage out of this. But on paper, Terms of engagement should be more damage anyway, as well as providing more utility and mobility. So I don't see a reason to ever take this. It's something that maybe you want to try out if you think you could. You think you've had an experience where it's like, man, I am hitting harpoon for sure, not every 30 seconds, like way less than that, and I'm not even trying to utilize the off-global focus generation from it. So maybe I just slot into flankers, but I think even that is a little bit of a stretch. Next is harpoon. We're always taking this for sure. It's great mobility. Awesome for a lot of these fights have like little knockback abilities, or you have to run out to drop something on the edge of the wall or away from melee, and you want to harpoon back in without losing too much uptime. So this talent is great, and with that, terms of engagement is great. It adds a damage component, adds focus generation, which leads to more damage, and gives you shorter cooldown to be able to handle mechanics more frequently. So I always swap into terms of engagement. I don't think there's really wiggle room, but I wanted to bring that up at least. Next is energetic ally. This is not good enough ever. You just don't. It's just not good enough. Increased focus sounds like, oh man, I could get some better burst windows. 10 focus is not enough to make an impact, and our damage is very consistent, so our burst windows aren't as bursty, if that makes sense. So trying to play around a burst window in survival is a little odd. Next we have Bloodseeker, which is a passive bonus to kill command. It leads into a crucial talent in lunge, so we always have to take this. And the increased attack speed has some synergy with lunge as well. Aspect of the Eagle, you could maybe make an argument for... No, you can't. There's not really a boss that you could make an argument for Aspect of the Eagle, I don't think. The only one would actually, I think, be Echo of Notharian, so that you can continue to have full uptime on his big devastation drops as you're moving from one section of the room into like a new... through a broken wall into a new section of the room. You could get some value out of the Aspect of the Eagle. The 1.2 minute cooldown is a little bit too long for me. Don't think it's going to cover. It's not going to cover everyone. So it's much better for you to just plan your damage around that cooldown in the sense that you dump focus before it's about to happen, so that while you're out of range, you can be dumping your bombs and your kill commands to rebuild focus and things like that without having this dead time where you don't have really valuable globals to hit and you're just sitting there hitting Serpent Sting. I think that's a better way to handle those situations than slotting into Aspect of the Eagle. In terms of engagement, we talked about, I think this is wildly valuable. Even though it seems like very little, I think this is huge. Even in Raid. Way better in Mythic Plus, but even in Raid, this is awesome. So getting into the second tier, we have Guerrilla Tactics. This is always take. Playing with Wildfire Bomb and not having 2 charges is absolute hell. The class feels broken. You take this. It does good damage. And there you go. Next, we have Lunge, which is our new talent this patch with the CDR on bombs attached to auto attacks, which is awesome. Increased melee range is also very, very good for just like staying out of stuff and being able to maintain connection to the boss while doing mechanics. Things like thinking about the first boss, Kazara, running beams into your portals. That extra 3 yards of leeway ends up getting you 2 or 3 extra globals a lot of the time that if you didn't have those 3 yards range, you probably wouldn't have. Next, we have our Butchery and Frenzy Strikes combination. Now, this is something in our Raid Cleave build, once we get our 4-piece, that you will be slotting into if you want to take this on those bosses. Now, I don't actually recommend this on the bosses where it would be good, which would pretty much just be Assault and maybe an argument for Sarkareth or Phase 3 of Notharian. However, I think just the single target build, especially with Bombardier, is better. And when you don't have the 4-piece yet, just run in Spearhead and just lean into what you're good at and killing the boss with single target damage, I think is the better move. Now, there's a situation where you're in a raid and everybody in the raid just has great single target and nobody can cleave. Like somehow you have this comp set up that everybody's cleave is terrible in your raid and you need to help out. It's majorly important that you move over your points into this so you can do a little bit more AoE damage. Sure, then you'll run this. But I think those situations are pretty few and far between. And if you're going to do that kind of thing, I think you might just play a Mythic Plus build, like a no CA Mythic Plus build, to further lean into doing the AoE. Because otherwise you have quite a bit of cleave, especially with the 4-piece. You have a lot of cleave and a lot of AoE just by playing your class. You just execute your single target rotation, and you do a lot of AoE damage with the new 4 set. Especially during Coordinated Assault when you have way shorter bombs. You open up your coordinated assault with 4 straight bomb hits. Well, 2 in a kill shot and then 2 more. But point being that you're able to collect a lot of cleave damage just by passively playing your single target rotation. In that raid cleave damage, just to mention over here on the Spec or the class tree, you would also drop a point from serrated shots and put it into explosive shot. But again, as I mentioned earlier, the situations where this is massively useful, I think are pretty few and far between. Could have some use in just trying to parse, which obviously is part of the game. Like if you're just trying to do the most damage possible, there's definitely a situation where you trying to do AoE is better than trying to do single target. But as far as killing the bosses go, I think leaning into single target with either Bombardier with the new tier set, new 4-piece, or Spearhead without it is the correct move. But that's kind of where you find your points for this. From Bombardier, we're dropping our 2 points in sharp edges to come up here, and our 1 point in flanking strike to go into Fury the Eagle. So with that, let's get back to our Spearhead build. Flanking strike leads into massively useful talents down here, so we're always taking flanking strike. It's also it's good damage, good focus regen, and it's great mobility. It's just another mobility spell that we have. So you have Harpoon as mobility, you have Disengage as mobility, we have Flanking Strike as mobility, and you have the Spearhead activation as mobility. All these things charge you to your target, which sometimes is a little bit troublesome. So just be aware that those spells do that, because you could be charging through mechanics and get yourself killed sometimes if you're not on the boss when you use them. And then Mongoose Bite, which leads into I should have mentioned Mongoose Bite first since it leads into it, but we're kind of right next to here. My eyes got distracted. You will be playing this in Raid. I know I mentioned in the Mythic Plus builds that I've swapped over to playing Raptor Strike instead because of the way the points work out. I think you get more value, but in Raid there's no contest. You'll be playing Mongoose Bite on every Raid fight. So get used to playing around your Mongoose Fury windows. Again, with the new 4-piece, it is a little bit less Mongoose Bite focused because you want to make sure you're not capping your bomb charges during Mongoose Fury windows, but you're still going to be casting. You're still maximizing your Fury windows as best you can. It's just the priority is a little bit different, and you have more globals to be spent on bombs in the middle of them. So with that said, we're taking 10% Mongoose Bite damage increase from Spear Focus as well, because we're leaning into our pure single target damage from Mongoose Bite over here. Next, we have Intense Focus. This is just a great single target button, especially with the combination of Spearhead and Deadly Duo. It allows you to have really great Spearhead windows without going out of focus. Passive increase to your resources, and that's pretty much it. Another passive increase to your resources is improved Wildfire Bomb. We'll take this in every build. It's a huge part of our damage. There's no real way around it, and it leads into other good stuff. So we talked about this row here. Let's move down to Viper's Venom. As I mentioned before, you will not be casting Serpent Sting. The only situation you cast Serpent Sting is you are out of melee range and you have nothing else to press. There's no other button you can press to do any damage to the boss. Is the only time you'll be pressing Serpent Sting. Otherwise, this will be applied by both your Green Bomb, which we'll talk about in a second, and through Viper's Venom. So your Mongoose Bite just is keeping it applied. And if you're playing your class correctly, you have enough Mongoose Bite cast to maintain this. Incredibly statistically likely to maintain 100% of time on this if you're playing correctly. Now, obviously, you can low roll and it'll just fall off. But still, the global spent on Mongoose Bite with the 30% chance to apply is a better global than than casting Serpent Sting itself. So even if it's like, oh man, Serpent Sting fell off, I cast 2-3 Mongoose Bites here, it's still not on. Is it time to just reapply it myself? It's not. It's just it'll apply, it's fine. Don't worry about it. just cast the Mongoose Bites. Next we have Sharp Edges, which we don't have space to take in these. In the Cleave builds we do, because we're more focused on just AoE passive damage, but you do not have space to take it when we're moving down here to Spearhead build. It's a great talent. It's just we don't have room to take it, and there's nothing to really pull off to get there. Next we have Sweeping Spear, which is leading into more Mongoose Bite damage. So we have a more multiplier here, a more multiplier here. This adds up to big Mongoose Bite hits, especially towards the end of your Fury, and isn't always take because it leads into our core pieces down here. Tactical Advantage, this is obviously with the new 4-piece when we play more around bombs, is good damage, but before then, Mongoose Bite is going to be a massive majority of our damage, and we just can't fit the points here. It'd be between this and Sweeping Spear, because we have to get down to the Spearhead talent package, and Sweeping Spear simply does more single target damage. Next, we have Bloody Claws. For each stack of Mongoose Fury, increases the chance for kill command to reset by 2%. This is simply too low of tuning. The chance is too low. Doesn't make enough of an impact. You're able to play your class effectively and manage your focus effectively without this, so it's simply a never take because of that. Next, we have Wildfire Infusion, which is a core part of the build, or core part of the spec, really. Not necessarily this build, but effectively, this is what gives you your blue bomb, your red bomb, your green bomb. Blue bomb being that you apply a bleed when you Mongoose Bite after. So typically, blue is something you want to cast at higher focus so that you can dump focus into getting up to 3 stacks of that bleed, which it caps at. Pheromone bomb or red bomb being something you want to cast at lower focus because it gives your kill command a chance to, or 100% chance to reset. So you can kind of use that as a focus regain or focus reset button. You dump, you hit your red bomb, you spam out some kill commands, and you're back up to full focus. You restart again. And then Volatile Bomb is just another way to be applying our Serpent Sting alongside Viper's Venom, which is what leads to our high Serpent Sting uptimes without really doing anything. So you take this all the time. It's just it adds intricacy to the spec, it adds damage to the spec, and it would not it wouldn't feel like you were playing survival without this talent. So thank God it's tuned in a way that it's worth taking, because I don't know if I could stomach the spec without this. This is what makes and breaks the whole gameplay for me. Next we have Quick Shot. This is really low passive single target damage, but it leads into Ranger, so we're taking it for sure. And it's more single target damage than just a baseline coordinated assault. I know I talked about this in the Mythic Plus video, where I think that the baseline coordinated assault is better than Quick Shot in that scenario, because you get good value out of the Wildfire Bomb damage buff in AoE. Single target, it's Quick Shot for sure. You also don't have to think about it, and it gets you into Ranger. So like I said, in this particular build, Coordinated Assault is a skip. We're playing the package here, the Keystone Spearhead package rather than the Coordinated Assault. So I will, after we talk about this, I'll just show the Bombardier. But actually, we'll show about the Bombardier build right here. So in this package, like I said, we have points for Sharp Edges because we don't have to take Quick Shot to get over here. We don't have to take this full package, which is 1 extra point compared to this package. So we're able to fit in our Sharp Edges, and then you take Coordinated Assault, Coordinated Kill, and Bombardier. Bombardier being a single target increase because you just get more bomb casts in general. You get every 2 minutes, you're getting about 4 more bomb casts, 3.5, depending how you manage your bomb stacks inside your cooldown. And this plays in the same way as Mythic Plus. Even though we're talking about bomb damage here, the buff to Kill Shot is more valuable than the buff to Wildfire Bomb. So in the guides that I linked in the Mythic Plus video, I'll link again in the description here. And in those, there are some macros involved with using Coordinated Assault. It involves making 1 extra bind. So it's very simple to play. I've talked to a lot of people actually this week because I'm a major proponent of Coordinated Assault in Mythic Plus versus the no Coordinated Assault build. And a lot of people have come in and expressed their hesitancy to play it because they read this thing, I got to use these weird macros to make the cooldown work. This is weird. I don't want to say intimidated, but you just, all right, I don't want to do that. But I'll just do something else. I'll just play no CD. I don't have to think about it as much. But I truly think that the spec with Coordinated Assault is way more fun. I also think it's better damage-wise in both Mythic Plus and Raid, assuming you have 4-piece. And it's really not... You make 1 extra bind that you hit once every 2 minutes, effectively, is how this works. And it's explained better in the guides. I'm not going to get into that right now. I might do a rotational guide video upcoming here soon, and in that, I'll go into way more detail about this. But for right now, I just know there's not much really involved. But you want to empower your kill shots as opposed to your Wildfire Bombs, still in single target. And this is a talent you can swap if you decide you want a little bit more cleave. Like say there's an ad set of glimmers on Sarkareth that's really giving your guild trouble, and you can move your cooldowns in a way that you have Coordinated Assault up for that set and take Birds of Prey. This is an insane button for just turbo nuking one of those sets of ads. So I would maybe consider playing around with this a little bit. for that boss in particular, depending on what you're struggling on. Otherwise, you can default to this for the Bombardier package once you have your new 4-piece. I would not play this without new 4-piece. Again, even with new 2-piece, I know you see 10% bomb increase on the new 2-piece. You're like, all right, let me play with some bombs. Not quite good enough. Spearhead's still going to be better in that package you go for. So, anyways, that's the deal with that. Let's move back to talking about the rest of this Spearhead build for when you don't have your 4-piece yet. So, Killer Companion is just kill command damage. It's our lead up into this talent is not insane. Kill command is not a huge amount of our damage, but it's just a passive damage increase that leads into the package that we are taking here, being Spearhead. Now, Spearhead is just a talent that is basically just buffing your Mongoose Bites and your kill commands. It's giving you increased chance for your kill commands to reset, which is important with Deadly Duo. I'll talk about in 1 second. And it makes it so your Mongoose Bites are dealing additional dot damage, and this stacks up. Obviously, as your Mongoose Fury windows go up, you get more of this 5-stack huge Mongoose Bites off. You have this huge little bleed running throughout this ability. It's great single target damage. 1.5 minute cooldown, so it doesn't quite line up with Power Infusion. That's maybe worth mentioning as well. Say you get 2-piece, and you're getting Power Infusion in your guild, right? And you have 2-piece. You don't quite have the new 4-piece. I would play Bombardier if I'm getting Power Infusion as opposed to Spearhead, just because it'll line up. You have better cooldown synergy with the Power Infusion, all that haste coming up for you. Not many guilds are giving Power Infusion to their Survival Hunter. Not many guilds are giving raid spots to their Survival Hunter. So this is probably not really a problem you have to worry about. There's maybe one guy out there that probably won't even find this video because he's just living his nice little life where he gets PI'd by his guild that loves him while he plays Survival Hunter. But if that's you and you stumble on this video and you don't have 4-piece yet, I would play Coordinated Assault rather than Spearhead because of that reason. Otherwise, lean into the Spearhead. The shorter cooldown is pretty nice. It has better lineups with a Death Chakram, so it's a little bit easier to think about when you're casting, because sometimes you will be in situations where it's like, okay, I have 1 CA left in this fight for sure. I'm only getting 1 more. So I'm going to wait for my next Death Chakram instead of slamming it on cooldown to make sure it's buffed a little bit more. Whereas with Spearhead, you don't have to think about this. They're going to be up together every time. As long as you're hitting Death Chakram on cooldown, it will be your cast, the cast you hit right before Spearhead. So your Death Chakram into Spearhead every time. So that's a goal for you if you're playing this build. Deadly Duo impacts how this build plays and what your rotation looks like. So essentially this makes it so your kill commands get buffed with every Mongoose Bite you cast, and it stacks up to 3 times, and then when your kill commands reset, it increases the duration of Spearhead. So the way this plays out, the most optimal way to play out with these buffs and get the longest duration on your Spearhead while not losing damage to just kind of like, I'm just trying to buff my Spearhead, is to hit kill command with 2 stacks on the buff. If kill command is available and you have 2 stacks on this Deadly Duo buff, you hit kill command. So in most situations, that makes this entire window look like Mongoose Bite, kill command. Mongoose Bite, kill command. Mongoose Bite, kill command. Forever. You'll get to a point at the end or towards the end, where you don't quite have a focus for a Mongoose Bite and you fill a bomb in there. And then hit your next required button, basically. But for the most part, and in Lust, it'll just be straight up Mongoose Bites and kill command. But there will be points where you run Focus Dry and you have to cast some other spells. But primarily, you are planning to just do that cadence of 2 Mongoose Bites, 1 kill command, 2 Mongoose Bites, 1 kill command, 2 Mongoose Bites, 1 kill command for the whole duration of the Spearhead. You do huge damage with it, and then you move on. You go back to your regular priority rotation, and that's that. So, Explosive Expert, we didn't talk about. This is just not good enough. It simply is the CDR and bombs is not good enough. It's before you get the 4-piece, your bombs don't do enough damage. After you get the 4-piece, the CDR you have on your bombs, especially inside your cooldowns, is crazy as it is. It's like hard to fit all your globals in, especially if you're hasted with PI or Lust. It's hard to cast everything you want to cast. It's like you don't have enough globals for all the buttons you want to hit. So this would just compound that problem, and it's not a DPS game because of that. So, with that said, Fury the Eagle we haven't talked about. I want to talk about your raid cleave options, and specifically I want to be thinking about Sarkareth with this. Now, Wowhead has a post, and the writers of the Wowhead guides are awesome. They've both been playing survival for a very long time. in all sorts of high content. So I value their opinions massively, but I think I would play something different than this on Sarkareth. And this is what they recommend for Sarkareth. Now, we've talked about how you swap a point over to Explosive Shot out of Serrated Shots, and that's to help with dealing damage to the Null Glimmers, which are the adds that come out on this fight. And then they also move their points over. They play basically like a no CD build from Mythic Plus, but in a way that I don't quite like. And that being that they have these 2 points from Spear Focus in Tactical Advantage, and these 2 points in Sharp Edges they have in Sweeping Spear. Is that what the difference is here? No, where are these other 2 points? Oh, I see. So in this build they have these 2 here, and these 2 here, or these 2 points, Ruthless Marauder, they spend on Sweeping Spear instead, and the points on Tactical Advantage they spend on Spear Focus instead. Now, this is going to be more single target damage, right? This will be a better single target damage build than what I'm about to recommend. However, if you are playing to kill the adds, I think you should play to kill the adds, which means I would still play Mongoose Bite, but I would lean into just play the Ruthless Marauder and Fury the Eagle, make this button huge, because the adds have a 45-second... I will also swap this, by the way. 45-second intervals is about when they spawn. So you have a Fury the Eagle for everyone. You can hold your Explosive Shot for everyone. You have a Death Chakram for everyone. You can play like a very strong 45-second cooldown build. And I think leaning into the power of Fury the Eagle and the AoE damage of your bombs, as opposed to some more boss damage from Sweeping Spear and Spear Focus, is the better way to play this. Now, I would try both. I'm not here to tell you gotta play this, like this is definitively better, because this will do more boss damage, and if you're struggling with boss damage, sure. But I think it's usually in raid, I think people try to make when they're coming up with their builds, they try to make these compromises in their builds where it's like, all right, I'm going to be pretty good at this and pretty good at that, and that's how I'm going to show up to this boss fight. But the nice thing about raid as opposed to Mythic Plus is you don't necessarily need to do that. There's at least 10 people in your raid. In most cases, 20, sometimes 30 people in your raid. So you can have, these are the handful of guys that are just slamming the boss. They are not responsible for adds at all. They're just blasting boss damage. And then the players that have nice cooldown lineups, which Survival being one of them, again, I got to swap this for this. Survival being one of them, for dealing with a particular set of ad spawns, lean into it. Just be the guy that just pulls up and those ads spawn and they're dead by the end of your Fury window. You dump your bombs, you Fury, you dump your regrown, the bombs you regen during Fury, and the ads they're over. You took care of it. So if I'm in a situation where I am playing Sarkareth, I am going to skip this Wowhead build or this recommended build, and I'm going to pick one of either a build that leans into Fury the Eagle or a build that just leans into single target and cleaves a bit with 4-piece. So I would play, and I have been playing this Bombardier build. I have not been playing this on our Heroic Sark kills. Now, granted, I'm playing with friends and we're kind of doing whatever we want. And I'm also playing with, like, I guess, really high-skilled players. Like, my friends tend to be guys that have rated in top 10 world guilds before, or have been consistent rank 1 Mythic Plusers for a while, just because that's the environment I've been in playing the game. So some of these decisions are a little bit less important because there's no need for me to hard carry a boss that I'm in. At least a heroic boss there isn't, because I'm playing with players that are quite good at the game. Whereas you may be in a situation where you figured out, like, man, I have to kill these ads. Like, these nobody else in this raid is gonna kill them. And in that situation, I would lean into this. Again, this is a little scuffed when I come over here just because it's my Mythic Plus build. But just focusing on the Spec Tree here, I would play this, and I would just have your Fury, your Death Chakram, both available, and Explosive Shot, all available for when the ads spawn in the second and third phases of that fight, and just dunk them. Just absolutely dunk them. That becomes your job. This is also probably the parse build for that boss. Worth mentioning that if you were trying to just do the most total damage, pad your face off on those ads and just lean into this. So Fury the Eagle, I guess we haven't talked about what this actually is for anybody new to Survival. This is effectively It is Fists of Fury with a bird sound at the beginning of it is what it is. It's an old ability that was awesome, actually, in Legion that they brought back in a slightly different way. But it's a frontal channel in front of you for 3 seconds. And the extra 2 points down here make it more than that. It make it an execute button, but like a huge range execute. Anything under 65% health, you have 50% bonus crit on. So a lot of survival hunters are running around with 40% plus crits. So this is almost an auto crit button as soon as the bosses drop below 65%, or as soon as the targets drop below 65%. This also reduces the cooldown of your bombs for every crit that it does. So when ads spawn, effectively what you're looking at is bomb, dump a Butchery charge to make sure you haven't wasted it, hit another bomb again, now you're empty, channel Fury the Eagle. It's most likely that you've recharged at least one, most of the time 2, depending on what your crit chance is of your bombs again. So then you just go back into hit and bomb, Butchery, bomb, Butchery, you know, typical survival stuff that we'll talk about in a future video about the rotation. But that's my recommendation here. Maybe went into this a little bit too much. You can kind of play whatever you want on Sarkareth. There's a lot of different correct choices, but I would recommend playing this or this as opposed to this, which is recommended by Wowhead. This is an in-betweener. It's not as leaned into single target. It's not as leaned into AoE. It does both okay, but I would kind of look at your raid comp, figure out where you're missing damage, whether it's boss damage or ad damage, and then lean heavily into buffing both of those things. So with this and the previous video about Mythic Plus, I am really curious to hear what you guys have to say about your talent builds. If there's any talents that you think I underrated or overrated, or some unique little Frankenstein build you've managed to put together that you had super success with, I'd love to hear about it in the comments, and let me know what you want to see next. Like I said, I'm going to hopefully do a rotational video coming up soon to kind of help you actually play the class now that you know what talents you want to take if you're getting into Survival Hunter for the first time. And then before I know this is a raid video, but before I get into doing raid commentary, I will definitely be doing dungeon commentary videos first, where I kind of walk through my thought process in a dungeon. Raid is a little bit more cookie cutter, cut and dry. You kind of show up, don't die, do damage to the boss. That's it. It's a little bit more simplistic to figure out how to play in raid, I think, at least. Maybe that's an unpopular take. Maybe you guys feel differently about that. Again, let me know. If you found this useful, please like the video, subscribe to the channel. There'll be more stuff coming this season surrounding Survival Hunter and maybe some Beast Mastery as well. We'll see, but primarily Survival Hunter coming up soon. So appreciate your time. Hope you guys have a great day. Thanks for watching.